Good morning, and thank you for tuning into my channel. Today I will be discussing the history of religion during the 16th century, mainly regarding Catholics and Protestants. Then I will be shifting to a book called The Cheese and the Worms, written by Carlo Ginzburg, and lastly, I will be touching on my knowledge gained from my Western civilization class. During the 16th century, there were a lot of changes in the religion world. The main and most significant change was the introduction to Protestantism from Martin Luther. Three traditions that emerged from the Protestant Reformation were Lutheran, Reformed, and Anglican traditions, although the later group is referred to as both Reformed and Catholic. The Protestant Reformation split into two movements, the Magisterial Reformation and the Radical Reformation. The Magisterial Reformation involved the alliance of specific theological teachers. The Radical Reformers formed communities outside and employed more extreme doctrinal change. At this time in the 16th century, the Protestant Reformation spread throughout the entire northern part of Europe. The Catholics' response to the Protestant Reformation is known as the Counter-Reformation, which consisted of new religious orders and a new missionary activity. Catholic Reformation takes care of its own places where it's reacting positively and negatively within Protestantism. During this time, Catholicism has gone through different changes throughout its time and revived certain aspects of the faith as well. For example, the Council of Trent was formed to discuss topics about salvation and consisted of three phases. Phase 1 and 2 deal with issues and controversies with Protestantism. Phase 2 of the Council deals with the idea of transubstantiation, which must be believed. One cannot believe in transformation in order to be Catholic. They must believe in transubstantiation. That belief is determined that the bread and water become the body and blood of Christ. Now that you know a little background of the religious world in the 16th century, let's get on to the subject of Minocchio. The Cheese and the Worms, written by Carlo Ginzburg, is a well-known microhistory book. Minocchio was a miller from a small town in Friuli, Italy, who had the ability to read and write. During this time period, Italy was considered the center of Christianity. Ginzburg tells the story of Minocchio's rebellious actions and his religious beliefs during the 16th century. Rebellion against the Catholic Church was not the norm. However, Minocchio wasn't your average miller. He rebelled against the structure and teachings of the Catholic Church. Minocchio, as rebellious as he was subject to the Catholic Church, who had power of life and death over those who rebelled against them. His past included being mayor and parish minister, which gave him some fame in the eyes of the public. Minocchio's beliefs were brought upon by evil spirits, and his belief that it was his calling to blaspheme. Minocchio believed he took upon the role of teacher of doctrine and behavior for the town, and it was his responsibility to teach the villagers the true way. His cosmology, the pattern or structure of the universe, influenced his beliefs because it was completely different than the Catholic Church. His cosmology was all chaos in the belief that water, air, earth, and fire were mixed together and formed a mass, and out of that mass cheese was formed. In the cheese were worms, which formed angels, and that mass also formed God. Another example of his cosmology is he stated, I believed the eternal God out of chaos. I believe that the eternal God out of chaos removed the most perfect light in the way that it was done with cheese. Where the most perfect is taken from that light, he made those spirits that we call angels. Then he chose the noblest among them and bestowed on him all his knowledge, all his will, and all his power. And this one he is whom we call the Holy Spirit, and God placed him over the creation of the whole world. There would be no chaos without God, nor God without chaos. They go hand in hand. Minocchio's reality was challenging for the villagers to accept because it was different from theirs. Although Minocchio was rebelling against the Catholic Church, there were some aspects of the Catholic faith he did follow. He attended Mass, went to confession, and received communion. Minocchio practiced the Catholic faith, however, disagrees and rebels against the teachings and structure of the Catholic Church. However, Minocchio stated he was born a Christian and wants to remain a Christian because he believes that it is the right faith. Minocchio believed he was superior to everyone in the Catholic Church. He believed it was more important to love your neighbor more than loving God. Minocchio rejects all sacraments and states baptism as merchandise, and as soon as we are born, we are baptized. He also states of another baptism, which is an invention, and that is when priests begin to consume souls even before they are born and even after their death. He believes the Holy Spirit knows nothing. Minocchio stated in the book, "You might as well go and confess to a tree as to priests and monks." He believes the Holy Spirit is greater than Christ, who was a man, whereas the Holy Spirit came from the hands of God. The only source of truth is from scriptures or the gospel. He believes he knew more than priests, and he was constantly arguing about the faith to anyone who would listen, even priests. Minocchio makes the comment, "God is nothing else than a little breath, and whatever man imagines him to be." That is a very powerful statement, and I would imagine at that time made the Catholic Church furious. Due to Minocchio's radical ideas and religious beliefs, his rebellion led him to 2 trials. During both trials, Minocchio was given the chance to state he was wrong and doesn't believe his hearsays. However, he chose not to admit his wrongdoings and ends up going to prison for 2 years. During his time in jail, Minocchio wrote a book called The Travelers, which influenced more of his radical religious beliefs. Minocchio wrote a total of 11 books, which sparked some of his religious beliefs. It appeared Minocchio had read the Quran for his second trial. Minocchio made comments that Jesus was not God, he was a prophet, and that some great man sent by God to preach in his world. He stated Jesus was never crucified and states it was Simon of Cyrene, and since he was crucified, he was a prophet. Another belief of Minocchio was that when the body dies, the soul dies too. He doesn't believe in their hereafter, and future punishments and rewards don't exist either. Heaven and hell are here on earth, the soul is mortal. During this time in the 16th century, nobody talked poorly of the Catholic Church or faith. The faith was not questioned. Everyone believed that what was taught and preached. Minocchio was a true rebel, considering he went against the norm and truly didn't care what the outcome was. He wanted to make sure he was heard. Originally, the author was researching ideas about witchcraft and then came across Minocchio. Witchcraft and Minocchio do have similar features. Accused witches were burned at the stake, similar to Minocchio being burned at the stake for blasphemy about the Catholic Church. Minocchio also had very similar characteristics to Martin Luther. However, unlike Minocchio, Martin Luther had a successful rebellion against the Catholic Church and became well known in the public eye. In The Cheese and the Worms, a witness stated, "He has a bad reputation. He has evil ideas like those of Luther." Luther had the upper hand because he had authority since he was a priest. He composed the 95 Theses, which argued about God and faith. It was then nailed to the doors of the church, and everything after gave rise to the Protestant Reformation. Like Minocchio, Luther was ordered to revoke his words and refused. However, Minocchio didn't have anyone to back him up nor support him, and Luther did. He was supported by the Elector of Saxony, whose name was Frederick. Martin Luther led a very successful religious rebellion against the Catholic Church. He was one of the few who succeeded. Minocchio's story teaches us during this time in the 16th century, the ability to rebel is typically unsuccessful because the individuals are controlled by the Catholic Church. Rebelling against the Catholic Church got individuals into trouble and led to serious consequences. Which we saw in The Cheese and the Worms, Minocchio eventually gets burned at the stake. Minocchio's story does relate to today's world because religion is still not openly discussed amongst individuals. To me, it was challenging to read The Cheese and the Worms. I was getting so frustrated with Minocchio because he wouldn't keep his mouth shut. He was constantly getting himself into trouble. Throughout the course of my Western civilization history class, I gained more knowledge about history and have a broader view on different religions. I grew up Catholic and going to public schools, so weren't taught much about other religions and their traditions and values. I'm glad in this class, Western Civilization, we were taught about different religions and their viewpoints. I can now confidently say I know more about specific religions prior to taking this class. Overall, one of the most important aspects I hope you have learned, and I know I have, is never to argue with authority because you will always lose. Authority will always have the upper hand. It's better to accept what needs to be accepted and move forward with life. Thank you for tuning into my channel and have a good rest of your day.